Hey folks, welcome to the Human Project Podcast. We're in episode 3 of our Connection series, and today we're going to be exploring, is it worth it? I mean, there is some pain and risk inherent in connection and in conflict, so wow, is that worth it? Why is that worth it? We go to some vulnerable places and explore what it's like to be disconnected. And then we explore what is it about being connected with others, and especially even in community, that God's designed us for. How does that work? Why is that important? And we find hope in that end of it. So listen all the way through. I invite you to join us on this journey. Thanks for being with us. Let's go explore connections more.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Chris.
How's it going today?
It's a good day.
It is a good day. It's a good day to have a good day.
It's one of the best days to have a best day, actually.
That Mr. Rogers thing?
Probably. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Hi there, neighbor.
Won't you be my neighbor? So speaking of neighbors, look at that. That was a perfect segue.
Wow.
Didn't even intend that.
Oh my gosh.
Neighbors, connection, building connection. So we're in part 3 of our series. We talked about what is connection. And then last episode, we spent a lot of time talking about how to foster it. How do we deal with conflict?
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned all of that seems like a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
So why is connection worth it is the
Yeah.
conversation we want to get into here.
Right. There's the kind of trade-offs
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned at the end. So there's a lot of risks inherent. There's a lot of work involved in connection. Why bother with this? Why put all that into it? As you mentioned again in the last episode, we don't end up on the loneliest end of the spectrum. There's some
Mm-hmm.
risks involved there as well.
Yeah.
So from your experience, what have you seen? Why is this worth it? Where have you seen it be, even though it's hard work, really, really valuable in your life?
Yeah. Just an anecdotal story, which I guess is what all stories are, or anecdotal.
Suppose, yeah.
But just thinking about my life, there was a time period in my life where I was just really, really, really deep in connection. I think I talked about this in my quote unquote college days, where I was with the ministry and we were working together constantly.
Okay.
And it was just really, really good depth with the people there. In fact, one of them is still my really good friend. And even though he lives 8 hours away. But then I went through a period of my life where I was in a lot of isolation. Like I didn't have community. I didn't have connection. And that was a really, really dark period in my life. And then a lot of things changed in my life against my will. And I was left in a spot of really intense pain and just dealing with a lot of change and dealing with like, what is my life now? Like, what am I going to do about this? And I had a really good friend that I reached out to just to talk, and I needed somebody to talk to besides my family. And my family was awesome and supportive and wonderful during this time. But I reached out to this friend, and I still remember that conversation. We ordered Chinese, sat on his front porch, and he just listened.
Wow.
And I'm like, I've been missing this for years.
Hmm.
I'm missing this for years. I've been isolated because I had been burned. Like the ministry that I was involved with did not end well. My time there did not end well. And still a painful, sensitive subject. I think that drove a lot of the isolation for myself. Like it didn't seem worth it. Connection didn't seem worth it to me.
Okay.
And then my friend got me plugged in with the church that I'm with now. This was 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. And I just remember like, wow, this is what I've been missing. And I bared my soul, talked about all the things that had happened, and met at a house that was shared by 4 guys who were living there, 4 roommates. And I just remember a couple of them stayed and we talked till like 3 a.m. And I'm not a night owl.
Yeah.
Like I'm in bed by like 9:30 every night.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just, I still look back on that as a turning point in my life where I was welcomed in, I wasn't judged, I was listened to, and those people are still really, really near and dear friends of mine. And the connection, the community that we have there is I know they'll call me if they see something. They're like, hey, what we've talked about, what you've said you're about, that's not what's happening now. And so just that power of that has been worth it for me.
Wow. So you say it was like 10 years ago you were sitting on that friend's front porch eating Chinese. And it's that strong of a moment for you that it looked like you were almost there. Like you could almost taste the Chinese food again.
It was really good then. I went and had it afterwards, and it did not taste nearly as good. So I think it had to do with the ambiance
That's
around
how
it.
food
And the
memory
friends.
goes usually.
Yeah. It was just a rundown Chinese restaurant next time I went.
But it was more about the pivotal moment in your life.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me that you felt disconnected, but the pain was increasing of your disconnection to the point where you were willing to take the risk to go be vulnerable with somebody about what was really going on, to ask for help, to be connected again and go, oh, this might hurt just as much. And it didn't.
Yeah. There's to be honest, there's still some fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think all of us, we've heard of the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Like you're not as good at something as you think you are, or you're afraid you're not as good at something as other people think you are. I think there's still some of that with community for me. Like I'm still afraid I'm going to get rejected, or that there's not going to be a good ending to come out of even sometimes our relationship. Like when we have conflict, it still brings up some memories of that. But I know that it's worth it. I know that mentally, I know that emotionally, like I'm pursuing that. But it's still, there's danger. There's vulnerability there. Didn't mean to get that deep with this, but I think a lot of people that are listening can probably relate. They've had something in the past that's had them go, whoa, I don't really know if I want that deep of connection again. Or maybe they haven't experienced that depth of joy and goodness and all of that with deep connection. But I just like painting that picture and that juxtaposition of my life because I've been at both extremes.
Yeah. So as you think about the disconnected time and the pain that caused and the connection that you now experience in your community, what does connection feed us? And I'll layer my question here and say, it seems like there's something there that we need as humans, the way God designed us, is to be connected in some ways, despite or in whatever of the risks that are involved. What do you see it feeding? What's so critical about that?
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before of going back just to the Garden of Eden. Like God, Adam and Eve were in perfect connection and walking with God. And I think there's still, ever since sin entered the picture, that disconnection. And Adam and Eve felt the need to cover themselves. There's a desire of us to be emotionally naked and unashamed, like fully known, fully loved.
Yeah.
And I think anytime we can go back to that, there's just this sense of belonging. Like, this is where I was meant to be. Like, you can hear, like, I think there's, 500 Disney songs about that same topic? But there's something just innate to us as human beings that we are meant to be in community and meant to be with other people. Like, I don't remember the original question because you could tell this is a passion point of mine.
Yeah. So belonging is a key need of ours. It's part of what we were made for.
Yeah.
Is to belong with others.
Yep.
So if you could speak to your former self in those disconnected spots, what would you say? Because I'm sure that there are some people listening that are feeling some sense of that disconnection like that.
Yeah, I think you can read the stats, like loneliness is one of the top things that is talked about for people 30 and under. I had a lot of doubt that it was worth it. Like, I tried a couple of like communities and churches and things like that, and nothing really stuck. In fact, I loved, not to paint broad strokes or anything here, but I really liked going to Crossroads.
Okay.
And Crossroads does a wonderful ministry, especially here in Cincinnati, and they invite a lot of people in. But the reason I liked going to Crossroads, I think, was an unhealthy one.
Mm.
And it was I liked to be able to go in, not talk to anybody, sit in the back row, sing, consume, and then leave.
Kind of the anonymous disconnection.
Yeah.
It's like faux connection almost.
Yeah. Like I felt like I was there, but I wasn't actually there.
Right.
So what I would like to say is like, it's worth it. And just saying that to people that are listening, I guarantee will not convince them like, oh, yeah, Chris says it's worth it. It's worth it.
Right. Let's go.
Yeah. But I had a lot of doubt that it was worth it again because I had gotten to such a rich depth with the people that I had spent so much time with that I doubted it. And it wasn't until I had somebody welcoming me in that that narrative changed for me. A narrative changed significantly. So maybe I guess my invitation or my advice would be like, try the listening things that we've talked about. Like see if that helps build connection in a safe, really less risky way. Before we dive into like all the conflict and stuff like that, like just start with, for one conversation, pause you sharing your opinion and listen to somebody else's and be genuinely curious about it. See how that goes.
Which is a lot of work, especially for somebody who's in a lot of pain, disconnection pain. I hear you encouraging them, though, to try that. Like instead of desiring the ocean of water, just go for a single conversation. Might be a Dixie cup worth of water, but get some connection.
Yeah.
And I've heard you mention narrative or story a few times. The stories we tell ourselves.
Okay.
If I can recast that a little bit, I'm when I hear that, I'm thinking of like the lies about connection. Of like, it's not going to be worth it. It's going to end in disaster again. Or for me, sometimes it's even OC. They really didn't love you. Those types of narratives that go on in my head that I imagine a lot of people hear too. So I might be hearing from you, but I would say to those same folks or to your former self, like those are lies. There is risk, no question, and those are lies. What do I want to believe instead of that? There might, and it doesn't even have to be like, oh, sure, every relationship's, no. Like, what's the small step toward hope that I can maybe try out and say, this might be worth it.
Yeah.
It might be worth a risk to try that small conversation of just listening to somebody or asking somebody to listen to me.
Absolutely. I think if we think of like the continuum, wherever people are at, if people are like me, where I was 11, 12 years ago, it was like I had no connection at all. I had no connection at all. And that I think is a great starting point of just try one conversation. If you're at a spot where you're in quote unquote community or you have good relationships with people, but they're not at the level that you want them to be, what's a step you could take to explore that a little bit further? Is it conflict?
Right.
Which sounds so strange because we tend to think conflict drives disconnection. And when handled inappropriately, it can.
Yeah.
But going back to the episode we talked about before, how do we handle that in a way that is making a request? I think back, we had a time that we were just having an off day, like you and me. And like there was time pressure for us getting ready for a training that we were doing for a new client. And like we started getting snippy at each other.
All of our worst instincts just were bashing at each other, just in conflict.
Yeah. And one of us like paused it.
That would be you, just for clarity. You were the one who recognized, hold on.
And I look back at that conversation that we had and we dealt with it. We made requests of each other, like, how do we do this and what's different? And I look back on that and it's been more fulfilling since then.
Yeah.
Like we're not afraid of those same things. And similar thing happened later on.
Yeah.
Because guess what?
We
don't
had
just
time
magically
pressure
change.
And same situations, all that. Yeah.
And we were able to recognize it a lot sooner before it got to that spot. And so I think things like that, making requests of others, is a great way to build that connection.
Yeah.
Further, if you're further along the continuum where you have great connection and you want to help other people practice it and build it and do it, like teach these things to other people, talk about these things to other people.
Go do this.
Practice it.
Somebody.
People say, what are you doing? Like, what is it about you that sets that apart? Like, that's such a wonderful question that we can get. So there's so much richness in connection and in community. And when we say the difference between connection and community, connection, it can be just one-on-one. Community is a group of people. Imagine if you had a group of people doing this.
Yeah.
Where everybody could go to anybody else talking about something that's going on. They have guardrails, boundaries, people to bring different perspectives, to look out for them in their life. Like, man, that reminds me of like what Jesus was talking about with the first century church. And like you can see even in Ephesians 4, like the unity chapter, like that's really the goal of what we're trying to go after, is so that we are all building each other up.
Yeah.
And deepening connection and able to reach people outside of like our immediate vicinity, just people who we might have a fleeting encounter with.
Yeah.
There's richness and depth there. Just got to try it.
It's taking the threads of connection between people and weaving them together in community creates very strong structure.
Yeah.
It's also, by the way, very attractive. So it's really an evangelistic technique too.
Yeah.
People want to, as you mentioned before, people want to belong.
Yeah.
And when a community has that strength of connection across multiple people, that is super attractive.
Yeah.
For good reason. It's meant to be.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for going to that spot, going vulnerable. Because I'm confident that all of us have experienced something that touched on or will experience it or are currently experiencing it, giving us a way to look at it differently.
Yeah. There is hope.
Yeah.
That's such a word that's been refreshed again in my mind this past year with the medical diagnosis that I went through.
Yeah.
Like it reminded me a lot of 10 years ago and just needing to cling to hope. Like, who is God? What is God's design for me in my life, particularly with others? And if you can ask that, you can start to taste and see like really how good God is. And even though things may be difficult now, there's hope for the future. So
both things are true.
Yeah.
It can be difficult now, and there's hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
Cool. There we go. So this wraps up our Connections series. So let us know what you think. Excited to hear from you, and let us know what else you want us to talk about in the future. We'll see you next episode.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Behind the microphones, we've got me, Mark Wavle, Chris Conlin, and our lead editor, Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit, and most of what we do is free because of your generous support. So thank you for joining us in our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to the fullness of God's design. To support us financially or to learn more, visit us at humanproject.us. See you next time.